So here we are, office hours. I mean, we've got a couple of things to talk about today, but I think I'd like to have everyone roll for initiative here. And if there's anything anyone wants to start us off with, I'm all ears.
Hey, my name is Will. I'm a software engineer for Scale AI. We're kind of like a data annotation company. And
Cool.
we've been using OpenSearch a lot to power one of our core products, like specifically OpenSearch on AWS. And we have long-lived indexes that heavily leverage like the has child, has parent queries. And I was just particularly interested in like any tips and tricks to help optimize our cluster to better like have better performance on those types of queries. We've noticed that we for these queries we spend a lot of time in when I use the API for profiling, we spend a lot of time in the rewrite time, like specifically when Elastic is rewriting the Elastic query into a Lucene query, it spends like 3 to 4 seconds in that part. But then the actual query part only takes an order of like microseconds. So that's just
Interesting.
something, yeah, that's just something I wanted to, a topic that I was particularly interested in coming in here today. I know the documentation says don't use these queries. If you need fast performance, please don't use them. But with the nature of our data, it's like we probably have hundreds of childs for one parent. So it's more convenient for us to do that than to put more work into denormalizing it into one document.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is whether your mappings are dynamic or not. You know, I know that
Mhm.
those can be made more efficient by specifically declaring a mapping and not having dynamic mapping turned on. But other than that, gosh, I think I'd have to yield to the floor there.
Yeah, the only knob I've been able to find that I can tune is the field data cache. I mean, and I've been reading that for join queries, like it does a larger data cache could help because they leverage global ordinals. But that's really, I'm not like an expert at all on Elasticsearch. Really, I've only been using it for the past few months, so I can only go off the documentation and make my own handwritten conclusions. I don't know like the
Gotcha.
details. Yeah,
Right, right. And so when you
yeah.
say Elasticsearch, I'm sure you mean OpenSearch.
Oh, sorry, OpenSearch. Didn't mean
Yeah, nope, it's okay.
to.
Just don't want to confuse anyone here.
Yeah.
So yeah, other than a clear mapping, I think gosh, we what we should probably do there is write a thread in the forum, and what I can do for you is tap a developer and see if they can offer you any optimization. So if I'm hearing you right, the question is how can I make those parent-child queries faster? Because when they get translated into Lucene queries, when they execute, they go very, very fast. But that translation from see what you did to me? Oh,
All good.
uh, OpenSearch to Lucene queries is what takes a while.
Yeah, it's interesting that, and if there's like any other like set cluster settings that I'm missing that could help with those type of queries, that'd be awesome. We do have a meeting with AWS specifically later today. It's like Scale, it's like our company has a bi-weekly with them. I don't know
I
if
see.
it's, yeah, maybe I can propose the same questions there, but a open forum would also be super helpful.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
is there any documentation so far that you've put out, about what you've tried and kind of so we can get a deeper look?
I have not. I'm not
Oh,
actually.
okay.
I haven't done too much homework. Is there a better place to like post these type of questions, like an online?
Now, what Nate was mentioning about the
Yeah.
forum is probably the
Mm,
best place. Because yeah, it seems like it's a really deep problem to
mm,
kind of cover on a Q&A.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, especially because actually it's funny you mentioned this. Not last week before last was the first time that someone had mentioned to me parent-child relationships. I'm like, oh, we still have that in there. Because I
Really?
know it
Okay.
got was it not removed from documentation, but there hasn't been a whole lot of people that are still leveraging that, I think.
Really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
And I actually had to experiment to find out whether it still existed or not, just by defining those index mappings that had those definitions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel for you. I'm not an expert there, but we should take a note to get you in contact with someone who can help you there. So I know that developers regularly patrol the forums. That's patrol, not troll. And so we can get you some help there. If you end up posting something, I will personally tap a developer to get them to provide you some feedback.
I'll definitely post. That's interesting that it's actually so unsupported. Didn't realize that they were going. It sounds like the attitude's like it's going away.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think we're just at a spot of great divergence, and so we're kind of playing catch up with our documentation a bit. Is that sounds right? Yeah, David.
Yeah, I think so. And it's just because there haven't been a lot of people. I mean, I'll say up until recently. Recently, it's just been like everyone's talking about parent-child relationships, it feels like. So I probably need to dive in and, do a deep dive on getting a test out there and seeing what it works like. But yeah, so it's good. I mean, getting a question out there also raises some what is that called? Points so that other people start looking at it, which would be great. Yeah, and then we can, like you said, it's not that it's unsupported. It is in there and it hasn't been removed. So I think it's going into support, I guess, as more people are kind of like pinging that they're using it.
Yeah, I think we're in a good spot to kind of, if we don't see something documented, that's not an implicit removal of something. I think also my suggestion is that did you look for documentation and not find anything? And that's kind of what's leading to this perception of not supported.
Oh no, when I go off documentation, I actually just go on the Elasticsearch 7.13 documentation, and it's there. It's like they say how to use it, but they don't really give tips on how to make it better. So I was just trying to find ways to make it, any tips to make it better.
Gotcha.
They just give you like the API and how to do the mapping so it works. But
are you familiar with our GitHub repos?
Not familiar with OpenSearch ones, but I can definitely do my own homework for those ones.
Yeah, so we have the OpenSearch project on GitHub. One of the repositories under there is our documentation website. And so what I usually do is if there's a piece missing or something that's not clear or some, in your case, pro tips, optimizations, if there's something you'd like documented, this would be the place to file an issue.
Awesome.
And that's, anyone can do that. There's no omission that can be considered too small if it's something that'll help more than just the person submitting it, so that's how I like to do things.
Okay, that's actually a cool hint. Yeah, I'll definitely file some tick. I found so I tried this documentation before, and then I went back to the 7.13 because I thought it was a little more comprehensive. But I think it would be helpful for me to actually just plug in the blurbs that are missing next time.
Yeah, and of course, if you there's no shame in attempting to denormalize your documents. And well, cool. Yeah, I hope that at least gets you a lead, Will. Thanks for bringing your question.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's see. I think we have a new RFC subcategory in the forums. I think we're starting to really quiz the public for their thoughts and opinions on how we should be moving forward. So we made a spot just for that in the forums. Yep, there it is. Thanks for the links, David. So our developers, in addition to GitHub, I think we're going to double target comments and feedback by posting in our forum as well, just to bring awareness. And there's nothing stopping anyone from commenting in both places, but the more people who can comment and participate, the better, even if it's just to say, oh, I like this or I don't like this.
Yeah. Also here, I'm going to drop another link. I just made a search for finding RFCs that anyone can use, reuse in GitHub. So as they're also posted to GitHub, you could follow this or check it out. Let me. Yeah, just a really good way. I'm a huge fan of GitHub search. So yeah, if you do org OpenSearch project RFC and then just sort by newest, that's a really good way to keep up to tabs, on what's going on with any individual RFC or new RFCs that pop out.
And again, I know I'm what's the idiom here? I'm beating a dead horse or whatever, but please, I encourage feedback from anyone, even if you're not a programmer, all the better, because you're the people who are going to be, using it. And that's probably, in some circumstances, that's much more valuable than a lot of other submissions. So we always appreciate that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So corollary to that, someone did just post, let's see, Ms. Henkel posted about potential divergence in schedule on our way to 3.0. And so I think there was some conversation that took place there about what are our two options there.
There we go. Chris got it.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so there's basically two potential schedules, and it's not just determining a schedule. What we're really doing is kind of determining a cadence or an approach to how often we want to increase major versions according to the tenets of semantic versioning. How long we're going to spend on any one major version before we introduce more breaking changes, because that's what's implied by increasing a major version according to semantic versioning. So there's I didn't personally have a whole lot of feedback into like how much effort that puts on the developers, but even if you're not a programmer, there's still plenty of thoughts to be had about that. I just my personal opinion is that the less times we can break, the better, because a lot of people are going to have custom integrations and client libraries that will have to be upgraded in parallel, and it just seems like trouble. So that's the opinion that I put in there, and I encourage everyone again to share.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opinion. So with regards to moving them closer, I feel like we should not have this huge gap between the 3 release candidate and then the 3 release, just because it feels kind of weird. A lot of people want to release features in between. So I kind of poked and said, we should move the release candidate back to later in the year instead of moving the release sooner into September. I get why we also are having more releases. A little background for those who don't know. Yeah, we use semantic versioning. And with semantic versioning, like Nate kind of mentioned, you only deprecate in major releases. So we've had, we had the 2.0 release, which happened just about, I think it was 11 months after the first release. And then we're going to very quickly do another 3, it seems like. All of that just because we want to get it to a point where we don't have to keep making breaking changes. There are a couple changes that we wanted to do to get the platform to where it's easy to build on and we can iterate fast using just minor releases rather than doing lots of big breaking changes all the time. So that's my thought.
Yeah, as a user, I tend to fall on that side of the fence most of the time. Once I build something, I want it to work without having to worry about it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, I'm not seeing any questions or anything showing up in chat, so I'm just going to keep on going. We have a couple other topics to bring up. Does anyone have any other subjects they want to bring up before I move between potential topics here? Coffee break, bio break? Sweet. I put my notes somewhere. Yes, we have version 1.3.3 release notes. Those, it's always good to stay on top of those release notes, especially if there's a new feature introduced or a patch, or it's good to be aware. I might be a little biased because it, part of my job.
No, for sure. Nothing super crazy getting rolled out this time. I think it was just a circuit breaker on the ML Commons was added. And then, using some updates to the anomaly detection. And then a couple bug fixes that went out for observability, KNN, and then dashboards. Yeah.
Enchanting, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Let's see. So it looks like you shared your search for finding RFCs on GitHub, David.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Was anyone taking on any new workflows or doing anything just arbitrarily creative with OpenSearch? And I know personally, I've been seeing a lot of talk about business intelligence and OpenSearch in the forums and anecdotally amongst customers. So I've been kind of playing with Ruby a little bit. I wrote a standalone app. It's not rocket science or anything, that takes a CSV and turns the headers into the mapping and then just dumps it into an index. And it's the interesting thing that I found is that it's so quick to go from pre-populated data to useful visualizations. Like that business intelligence case is so useful. And the use case, I've been told it's silly, like literally, silly. But I downloaded 3 CSVs and had a visualization within an hour. And that's, there's just this weird pleasure in being able to visualize data in an effective way, regardless of the simplicity of the ingestion. And I've actually been having a bit of fun with that. And it's fundamentally, it's not too different than importing sample data, which we have buttons for. I've always kind of thought that we should have buttons on the UI that make it a little bit easier to take in arbitrary data sources. Upload your Excel sheet, upload your CSV, point at a URL with a CSV on it, just things like that make that business intelligence a little bit more accessible.
For sure. Real quick, I just want to pull in this question that came in the chat from Nikki. Asked if the fixes from 1.3.3 are present in 2.0.0.
Yeah, I don't think I know the answer to that right away.
So I believe they are backported. I don't remember off the top of my head if they're done in a minor. I know Andrew's on the call. He might be able to speak a little bit better to that. But if they're not in rolled back or backported into 2.0.0, then they'll get released in 2.0.1.
That seems correct.
No worries. Yeah, absolutely, Nikki.
Well, I think I have exhausted my pre-populated topics here. Let's see. Berlin buzzwords already passed, didn't it? It's too late to get in call for papers for OpenSearch Con, yeah?
Yeah. But you still have time to register. So definitely want to make sure you make it out to that. Registration link I will post in the chat. We had a ton of really great, what is it? I keep wanting to say RFPs, but that is, I used to work in the solar industry, so it was a request for proposals. Thank you, Chris. But yeah, so bunch of super great papers. I think we ended up with like 35 or so, which is more slots than we're going to be able to fill. But the moderation team's going over it, going to be pairing through those, and hopefully we'll have an agenda out here shortly.
It's going to be good fun and camaraderie there out in Fremont Studios in Seattle. It's a beautiful location.
We have a question in the chat. If
yes, sorry, Will. We usually do hang around for a little bit after, just in case there's long topics, and I don't have any hard stops. So, anyways, Will is asking is a question about KNN support. Go ahead and chime in, Will.
I was wondering what the so I saw, thanks for linking the RFC for the RFC search. And I see there's this KNN search support in OpenSearch. K nearest neighbors, and that's definitely one of our strongest use cases for Elastic. And I see that there is an RFC that's posted 5 days ago. Is the best, what if this from going from RFC to being something being delivered, what would you say is like the timeline for that? Because it's definitely something where, it's definitely a huge use case for us. And we've actually considered looking at, you guys are probably aware of Vespa because they more natively support this type of search. But OpenSearch has a much bigger community. It's also more convenient because it's hosted by AWS. So that's why we haven't made the migration. But part of me wants to kind of just stick with OpenSearch and wait for this to come out. And
so OpenSearch,
Go ahead.
Okay. So OpenSearch already has KNN, but at the moment it's our own implementation. So that RFC that you're seeing right now is for us to go and actually migrate to Lucine's native KNN implementation. So at the moment, it's our own, implementation that runs on OpenSearch, but this would just move from OpenSearch into Lucene, just because Lucene, it has the support of the entire Lucene community. And, it just feels good to be able to contribute that back and also build on top of that. So anything that we kind of learn, we find out, we can contribute that back to Lucene core.
I see. I guess specifically, there is one major drawback with the current KNN implementation that when I was looking at the RFC, I thought it was addressing it, but it doesn't seem to. It actually doesn't look like, you're right. It looks like they're just migrating the implementation, but not necessarily the API.
Yeah.
And that's there's no pre-filter support with KNN. I know it's like hard to have both like a nearest neighbors search and regular where filter categories. And it looks like if you want to add a pre-filter with it, it just defaults to using a script scoring, which then becomes just like a brute force search. The reason why I think like not having this pre-filter is particularly painful is a lot of times, most indices are multi-tenant, right? Like you have multiple users or multiple kind of data sets sharing the same Elastic index. So you always need at least that one filter to exist, like this user A or user B, and search over their vectors. Without it seems like you basically have to create an index for each user or just resort to, like a brute force scan. I guess I misread the RFC. It doesn't seem like that's addressed. So I guess the best step for me would be to comment on that RFC then, right? Going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
It's very likely that you're not the only person with that question. So even just being the one to ask the question will usually prompt some feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
does anyone else here try and use it at KNN, but with at least just one pre-filter?
But you also had a question, Will, about time to implementation, and so it's generally bad form to promise things in my experience. But we do have our kind of roadmap for OpenSearch that you can check. We don't list patch versions on there, but minor versions.
Pull it up. Yeah, I think that's interesting though. I think a lot of people right now are using KNN for, kind of different types of contexts. So not a lot of people, I think right now are using it for e-commerce, at least from within the OpenSearch community, because we have just so many people doing log analytics. So I definitely think it's going to be interesting seeing about this though, because there are a lot of people that are starting to ask these sorts of questions, asking when, there's going to be support for, what was the other big one that I was trying? There was a proposal out there to do learn to rank. There we go. That's the one I'm looking for. Yeah, learn to rank is a huge one that a lot of people are asking for. Like, hey, how do we support this better with OpenSearch? And there's some work being done on a standard for that. So, yeah. All that to say, please comment on RFC because I'm interested to read more about kind of how you guys are using it.
Yeah, sounds good. I guess is I the first person to bring up this pre-filtering issue with KNN?
The first that
or
I've
have you heard of? Yeah, have you heard of? Has there been other people? Are we unique, or do you think other users are facing the same hurdle?
Only a few ways to find out.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So Nate and I are both advocates for the OpenSearch project, but there are tons of engineering people that probably have been hearing about this for some time. I mean, I think, there's a whole search relevancy community. Which, are you a member of that? The what is it? This actually search relevancy community on Slack.
I'm not. I will take a look though.
Yeah, check it out.
It's an OpenSearch workspace in Slack.
So it is not OpenSearch related.
Okay.
It's actually just search relevancy, and it's a huge community of people that are facing these same kind of problems, and might be worth checking out. Seeing if they have other implementations, just because yeah, that is something that would be like top of plate for them. And there is an OpenSearch channel under the search relevancy Slack, but
I see.
Yep. I'll find that and paste that, but
I think I found it.
Yep, that's the one.
Nice. I didn't know about that.
They're a fun community.
Good stuff, dude. Cool.
Yep, that's it for me. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Happy to help. Well, is anyone else curious about anything? I didn't see any new questions come in on chat. We are 3 minutes over the half hour, but I am not in a hurry. Thanks for coming, Will. Always nice seeing new faces in here. I love it. I'm curious about something. Usually, when new versions get released, if your job is with a particular software product and a new version of that product gets released, like usually it's, well, for me, it's fun, but it's usually good practice to kind of install that new software and play around with it. I'm curious if people with OpenSearch are doing the same thing and, at least playing with these new versions and trying the new features. Because I noticed lately, now that we're double fronting the RFCs into the forum and in GitHub, we've been getting a little bit more feedback, but I'm just curious, like at what scale people are actually trying new builds, because David and I probably do that as a matter of course, just so that we can answer questions about it. But I'm curious just how much inherent curiosity there is in the general public. Probably a wide open question, but. Yeah, interesting. I'll have to find some way to gather some anecdote about that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, from my experience with I was working as a DevOps engineer. I think so much of our time got put into just developing the systems that we needed to develop. It left us very little time to explore kind of the functionality that our systems had. Like even going back and talking with some of my friends that are still in that space, it's like it's really interesting. Unless your company's well innovation minded, you're just going to be not missing out on functionality and features, but like it will pass you by probably until you actually have a need for it, which is unfortunate, you know. Not a lot of companies are willing to put time and money behind engineers learning stuff. So that's my 2 cents.
All right. Well, it looks like the intensity is simmering down here a little bit. I guess we can call this good. You're free to go if you like. Otherwise, I'm gonna stick around just in case anyone has any other questions. And thank you for coming, everyone. It's always nice to see people in here.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Peyton, do you have a minute?
Of course.
Okay. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm sorry that I'm not putting my camera, but I'm really at home environment in the moment.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm calling from I'm doing home office, and I'm in Europe time zone. But I would like to. So I work for SAP, and I'm. We are using OpenSearch in some of our internal systems, and we are quite happy with it. I particularly work in the area of Kubernetes, and we are using, or let's say, for in-house purposes, we built a logging stack in Kubernetes environment featuring OpenSearch. Maybe I'll post a link in the chat to a GitHub repo, publicly available, where you can see some of the work that we have been doing. But this is not actually that important.
Just okay.
To post the link there, and then I'll continue with my question. So here it is. And but my question goes into general direction of actually promoting and getting OpenSearch while establishing Kubernetes clusters and setups. I mean, what I have seen and what I'm seeing out there is actually that people have issues, or they struggle a bit when they put Kubernetes in a OpenSearch in a Kubernetes environment. Of course, you have to follow certain best rules when you're dealing with containers in terms of persistency and securing the instances and configuration changes and updates and so on and so on. And I know there is 2 Helm charts generally available under the OpenSearch project, one for dashboard and one for OpenSearch per se. But they cover, how to say, kind of a subset or only one side of the equation. If you want to have a sophisticated or at least capable logging stack in Kubernetes environment, only dealing with OpenSearch and OpenSearch dashboard is not enough. And even if you want to put your effort there, there is still lack of, how to say, good tutorials or good practices which can guide people which they want to adopt OpenSearch in this environment. So I understand that OpenSearch is not only for Kubernetes, of course, naturally, but I think it can help if there are a bit more effort around proper positioning or describing how OpenSearch should be used in these kind of environments, and containerization setups.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that, because our getting started page, it takes place within the context of Docker, and that causes people to have to learn Docker at the same time as OpenSearch. And so, yeah, I think there's a little bit of a hurdle there as well with Kubernetes, getting those tools well established. David linked to our Kubernetes operator, but I don't, in terms of best practices or how to make it a more sophisticated launch. Gosh, I think the best outlet for that would be a documentation request, or we're always looking to publish blogs, or if you think, if you could file a documentation request and say, hey, this would be a good blog article, you don't have to work here to write blogs and submit pull requests with blog content in them. So there's a couple of ways I think we could address that one, but it sounds like in terms of documentation, what we really should address here is more sophisticated implementations with Kubernetes and the Helm dashboards.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem as well is, it's Kubernetes is like really well tuned, I think, for ephemeral stuff. And what a lot of people end up doing, like you mentioned, it's like we have Helm charts, but the Helm charts really, that covers a static config, which is really hard to do when you need persistent data, so scaling out, scaling up, how do you manage all of that, when you've got a logging solution and you want to persist your data? If your data isn't persistent, it's not necessarily useful, right? So yeah, I would agree with Nate. I mean, anywhere that we could write a blog on that, I think it's just such a deep topic that it's one of those that's really hard to cover elegantly, because you're talking about how to do things in Kubernetes that they're hard to do, really hard.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for us, for me, it took, let's say, a good few years actually to get to a mature state where we have a good confidence in the layouts, in exactly those problems. I mean, how we configure the stuff. Actually, we ended up in writing a bit of also kind of operators or controllers, control loops around it, because we very quickly understood that in Kubernetes environments, most likely you want to offer different, let's say, work producers to be able to have a dedicated indices with dedicated structure, with some probably pre-processing, those kind of things. And actually, if you want to really take the benefit of having OpenSearch in such kind of environments, the vanilla, let's say, setup of OpenSearch is not enough, or at least if you want to go into more stable and serious kind of environments, then you need a lot more to go there. Starting from simple things, as I said, like ability to describe your layout of the OpenSearch in terms of types of nodes that you want to be available there, going through the ability to supply on demand or on request, let's say, configurations for index structure, using the APIs which are available. And of course, when we go into the OpenSearch dashboards, then ability to provide on the fly index patterns and various form of visualizations, and taking the full leverage of, let's say, multi-tenancy approach in dashboards application. And all these things works. But as I said, I mean, it took us quite a long time to gradually reach this kind of maturity, which actually is there because, yeah, the APIs are there. the configurations are there, but you have to dig out quite heavily through various sources of documentation, various sources of forums and chats, also covering open distro times, and even pre-open distro times, getting back into the Elasticsearch time frames to actually being able to come up with something that can have a richness of features and configuration ability that can really put this into, let's say, application agnostic, cluster-wide logging stack for Kubernetes. And even today, I might say that there is no such thing available out there, or at least I'm not aware of ability to provision, for instance, for bits, they have quite good also provisioning functionality, and they have also controllers on their side, which allows you to put good configuration patterns in the log shippers that you put into, let's say, in your clusters. And then we have the OpenSearch Helm charts, but there is nothing that combines these two worlds. I haven't looked in this operator that you post the link here.
Yeah.
I will definitely take a look. But what I'm saying that even today, after that many years, there is no such thing that goes hand to hand from the origin of the logs up to the indexing and retention policies and all these stuff that we have.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good call out. And it's one of those things that we're really struggling with, just because even though the project has technically been around since 2011, if we're counting how long the code base has been around, OpenSearch as a group hasn't been around that long. We only just did our first release mid-year last year. And I think that's one of the problems we keep running into is we just don't have there aren't a lot of people with very mature pipelines yet. And actually, it's funny you mentioned this. This is one of the talks I've proposed for another conference this year is, what does maturity look like with OpenSearch? Like there aren't a lot of solid examples out there, people sharing like, this is our experience. And like you said, the APIs are there. It's just documenting that whole process of like what it takes from, like getting it up on your computer for the first time to like having, good support for multi-tenancy, those index templates. Also, even further, one of the things that I kind of want to work on is a deep engineering understanding of OpenSearch, one of the things I was just talking with an engineer about yesterday was we have an index shrink action that can be triggered on index life cycle management, index shard shrink particularly. And I was talking to him about it, and I was like, hey, are there any like gotchas really that people should know about? And one of the things he said is, oh yeah, well, when you shrink your index, it actually duplicates the index. So you need 2 times as much data for that index during that period. And by the way, it's going to be a massive hit to your cluster. I'm like, that's important. People need to know that. So I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like one of the overarching themes is that we need examples. We need people finding success and then sharing it.
Exactly. Cool. Speaking of Nikki, if I'm not already linked up with you, connect with me on LinkedIn because I'd like to hear a little bit more about your use, and it would be definitely interesting if we could get a blog out there, covering some of the experiences you guys had and in particular areas of issue.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let me just get the LinkedIn URL. Yeah, definitely. We started with, many years ago, there was a product which was using Splunk, and developers were actually logging quite crazy, because that was back in the time the best practice for debugging a production system, and apparently the cost rise quite high. And then we started to see, hey, maybe there should be other ways where we can actually put these things into a better shape. And then Kubernetes came around, basically. And we said, okay, let's take a look into this. And yeah, I mean, that's where we actually currently using OpenSearch, more or less. Just a sec. And I copy my LinkedIn.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, here it is.
All right, I'll link with you right now. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that too. I mean, it's one of those things, like I said, we're super aware of, but it's like, it's hard to get started on, you know, like how do you start that path? So I'll be happy to hear more from your experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not a product that we use these things. It's not participate in any, how to say, a customer facing systems or interaction. We use it more in, let's say, in the back office. But definitely, it took us quite a steep learning curve to get into a state where we are actually confident in what we're using, and also in OpenSearch in general.
Yeah.
You'll have to let me know what the trick is.
For confidence?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not joking with this. We started with a system that produces a couple of billion of records per a minute or so. And when you have the starting point, believe me, then you can, and you manage to get this thing running, then you probably have discovered quite a nice way to manage the stuff. And OpenSearch actually does this. It really can cope with a huge amount of data when you have the proper architecture, when you have the proper constructs in the communication part, and those kinds of things.
Awesome.
Yeah, 10 years later, and developers still walk like crazy.
Yeah.
It's never going away.
It's never going, no matter what observability topics will be out there, works will come.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we do have a hard stop at 10 today. So I think, did we get you a lead, some help, Nikki? You're going to meet up with David and see if there's more help we can provide.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting out, and good afternoon. Good